I am literally, as we speak, reallocating my liquid portfolio to create a 7-figure dividend income every year. And yet, even as I'm doing that, I believe that passive income is essentially a myth, something that is overhyped by people who have a bill of goods to sell you, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. One of the things that frustrates me about passive income is partially the company it keeps. And you've got a lot of people online who, number one, seem a little bit skeevy. I support entrepreneurs. But I don't know how many more courses we need on how to create money while you sleep. And I think people, somewhat intentionally and many unintentionally, have this ill-conceived notion of what passive income is. That they heard, Warren Buffett say you have to learn how to make money when you sleep, even though Warren Buffett is like in his 90s and is still working harder than a lot of people work in their 20s. And they have this idea of you need, 7 different streams of income. The average millionaire has 7 different streams of income, and they focus on how do I create 7 streams of income at once rather than figuring out how to do one well and build that. And it just feels to me like you have this industry of people who are looking for easy money. They're looking to, learn the secrets of the rich when really the secret is working hard and having a good idea and scaling it up. And then you have people who are preying on that. And so I'm going to talk about exactly why passive income is a myth, and I'm going to dissect some of the things that people think are passive income and why it's not entirely passive income at all. If it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson, the founder of Nomad Capitalist, and we're a boutique consulting firm for 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors who want to reduce their taxes, want to diversify and protect their assets, and want to live freely in an unfree world. Because I believe, and so my bias coming into this, by the way, I've told you before, Midwestern American Protestant of Northern European ancestry, I believe like winter is coming and you have to work. But I'll tell you why that's not just my own personal bias. I'll tell you why I think that factors into the passive income conversation in a moment. And so the people that we're working with all created something. They created a business from zero and they suffered all the slings and arrows, or they started investing and they learned how that worked, or they started learning how to become a poker star, or whatever the case may be. I think out of well over 1,000 clients served at this point, 2 inherited any kind of substantial money, like that was their identity. And so I'm used to working with folks who do that. And so when I see people like this, I just really get confused.
Hello, Gary.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. You?
Great.
I have a question about passive income, and
Okay.
I want to know what kind of trends do you see for a person interested in that? I don't want to be stuck in an office 9 to 5 for the rest of my...
Well, passive income comes in 2 forms. 97% of the form is the shittiest thing on earth, and 3% is the tried and true thing that has actually created passive income in the history of mankind. So let's find out which side you're on. How are you thinking about, when you say passive income, do you mean what do you mean?
I mean not having to work all day long. I want to be on a beach in Mexico instead of being on an office in Sweden in cold November.
Are you being serious right now?
Yes, I'm serious.
The quickest way to not be on a beach in Mexico is to think that passive income exists. It's a bad mindset. I really believe that. I think the reason so many scumbuckets are making so much money is because you're buying sources over and over, thinking there's some magic formula for passive income. Passive income looks like this. You take money that you can afford to go to zero, and you put them in the 2 places that have historically created passive income. Public markets, that you don't care if it goes up and down and you just wait to the end, or real estate, and you hope that your real estate area doesn't get crushed. Everything else almost doesn't exist.
I'm thinking more of real estate because I've been involved in it in Sweden.
Love it.
And for all the Danish people, it's pretty like the government is very restricting on creating a real estate business. It's a lot of taxes. It's really hard if you don't have the money in the beginning. And
so shouldn't you work your face off to get money, and then put it into the real estate?
Yes, I should.
Okay. Look, and I think you know, and I'm happy I could see your energy. I'm so passionate about this issue. There are people that are ripping people off at the level of hundreds of millions of dollars because they're selling this dream because they made a video with pretty girls in a beach in the background and are making people spend $1,000, $2,000. It's breaking my heart. Passive income doesn't exist, and anything that starts with I don't want to work is already a problem. What you need to do is, I understand I don't want to work in an office or something I'm not passionate about. The best way to make money is to make less money than you're making now, enough to still live, because you got to live, around something that does interest you, because you wake up 8 years later and something good is actually happening. So it's not everybody wants to make it the extreme of, I'm sitting in my job, I hate it, this sucks, all the way to beach in Mexico. But there's a real in between, which is why I wrote Crush It, which is at night, that is paying for the life that you have to live right now. You don't take some of that money at like 17 beers watching the World Cup. What you do instead is you work on something on the internet that costs you nothing to start, save all those dollars, build something for yourself over 7 years, and then job to your own business. That's passive.
Okay, thank you.
And so what Gary Vaynerchuk points out in that video is that you've got to go out and work hard to create the money to build passive income. So unless you did inherit money, where's the money going to come from, right? If you're an investor, you need some money to invest. Now, we've worked with folks who started out with, they took the stimulus check during the pandemic, and they invested that, and they just kind of learned how to become investors. Or I think more so, they took 50 grand they'd saved up and learned how to become an investor, and then they created multi-million-dollar incomes investing. The fact that you're investing doesn't mean it's passive income. That's a job, right? We've had a couple of guys who are poker players and professional gamblers. It is their job, but it's not something that they do when they go to Vegas. It is their full time. And when I asked one of them, what is it that motivates you, that you keep doing this? He said, mastery. How do I become the best poker player there is? And that kind of flies in the face of what a lot of people think passive income is, which is like, how do I work 5 hours a week? How do I put everything on autopilot? How do I just have everybody else handle things? Obviously, in a business, you have to delegate. We have 61 employees here at Nomad Capitalist all around the world. I don't do all the work myself. People think I'm checking the Twitter comments or something. Oh, Andrew, I saw what you said. Yeah, I'm not checking the Twitter comments. But yet, you don't want to delegate so much that you're just literally doing nothing. So you have to get the money first. My opinion on that is you're either an entrepreneur or you're an investor. Now, of course, people can be both, but I believe that you are probably much more in one camp than the other if you really analyze it. I had to realize I'm much more of an entrepreneur. I grew up wanting to be an entrepreneur, and yeah, I also grew up watching CNBC at 15 years old. You can see why I wasn't going on dates when I was 15, reading books by Bill Gates and other tech guys and sitting around watching stock prices. But you're either an entrepreneur or investor, because I have friends who, sure, they run businesses, but they struggle with it much more because they're great investors. They're analytical. In the same way that we have clients who are entrepreneurs and investors, we have guys who are world-class stock traders, options traders, swing traders, all kinds of stuff like that. And then they start businesses and they say, hey, I'm probably not really a great entrepreneur. They do it because they enjoy it, right? And so I think that most people are probably going to be in one or the other. I see a lot of entrepreneurs. I had one guy who was so honest, and I resonated so much. He said, I literally have like $8 million in the bank because I don't have the time and I don't exactly know what to do with it. And I don't really just feel like hiring some kind of boring stock advisor, but I don't know what to do with my money because I'm just too busy making more of it, right? He said, eventually I'll get around to it, right? And so a lot of people criticize, a lot of people in the passive income crowd, like, he's losing money to inflation. It's like, yeah, he's got $8 million, he's getting $3 million more this year. And yeah, like over time it's gonna be an issue, and he needs to learn how to delegate and step a little bit of the business to have time to have that handled and have his investments handled. He needs to figure out what he's gonna do. But most people who are out there preaching passive income don't just have $8 million sitting around in a $3 million income stream. And so figure out which one you are, entrepreneur, investor, and I would go down one of those tracks if I'm trying to start this. So if I want to make more income, I'm going to figure out, how do I expand my business? How do I sell my business? How do I start a new business? What's the next venture? I'm not as much going to focus on generating constant income from investments. However, what I'm personally doing right now is rebuilding kind of a core of my liquid portfolio to generate a substantial amount of dividend income every year in stuff that's not like my business at all, which is very consistent, kind of boring stuff, just dividend yield, stocks and other assets that aren't going to move a lot, just consistent income, well diversified all around the world, of course, because I have a cash flow business. I can continue to push on that cash flow business, and even as I have somewhat stepped away and do less of the stuff these days, the business keeps running. But I don't fool myself that my business is somehow a passive income, and I don't really even fool myself that the money I will earn every year in dividends, the money that I do earn in dividends and all those kinds of income sources now are not passive, because 18 years of incredibly hard work and effort and making mistakes and being frustrated and learning, nothing passive about that. It's like when you go to the doctor or you come to Nomad Capitalist, like, why can't you just tell me the answer to this 5-minute question? Like, why do I have to come into your office and make an appointment and pay you and have an exam? Why do I have to hire you for a service? Well, because it's been many years of training in the making and a lot of expense to learn that thing that takes 5 minutes. Nothing passive about it. And so I think it's a totally different mindset, quite frankly. Again, speaking as an entrepreneur, the person who's seeking passive income and calls it passive income, obviously if you're a wealthy person, you have income coming from different sources, but you've done that because you had one thing that you worked with well at first, and then you just kind of started diversifying the same way. I have money in stocks. I have money in, I think maybe there may be a case for bonds in the near future, just for fixed income. I have money in REITs and real estate and things that just throw off cash. But that's not how I'm making my money. That's a way to preserve capital in a way that increasingly I can have money coming in that I can live on, and that gives me a security versus a much more volatile business, because businesses come and go. Much more so at my level than a blue chip stock or a portfolio of, REIT portfolio in Singapore, for example. But I also understand that passive income is probably never going to, it would take a long, long time for the passive income to exceed the active income, unless I just purposely wanted to tank the active income. It's going to take a long, long time to do that. And so, if you are an investor, you need to get the money first. So what are you going to do to save up money? And if you've got a great talent for investing, sure, we've seen people turn $50,000 into $5 million, and then they turn that $5 million into consistent $1 or $2 million a year. One thing I will tell people is capital gains to me are not income, right? Capital gains just sitting there means nothing. Capital gains taken out are not consistent. So I have a business that makes whatever amount of money every year. It's not guaranteed to make that money next year. A stock has gone up, and I think some of these people who talk about passive income online are young enough, and I'm not trying to be patronizing, but they're young enough, they've never seen a recession. They may have been too young during the global financial crisis, and they just think like, oh, it's just stocks always go up. And so, hey, S&P, 10% a year. That's great, but not every year. And so you can't not eat in the years when the S&P 500 is down. So that's not really passive income. I don't look at capital gains as that. And so I'm constantly talking to people where it's like, hey, what's your income this year? Oh, I'm making $2 million. First of all, capital gains and dividend income may be taxed differently. And so from what we help people with, it's like we need to know if you make $2 million in income, if that's in dividends, that's going to be a much different tax conversation in terms of how you're going to handle that and where you might want to move, especially depending on where the dividends come from, versus if you're just selling stocks because they go up and you're just capturing some of that capital gains. So obviously, again, dividend income, dividends do go up and down with the health of companies, but to me, a dividend is a bit more sustainable versus capital gains don't always occur. And so capital gains aren't really income. So if you're an investor, you have to get the money first. If you're an entrepreneur, again, it's going to take you a long time to build up enough passive income than to replace your business. And so one of the things that I see with people who talk about passive income, I saw an article on CNBC recently. By the way, not saying people shouldn't have different lifestyles, but there was a gentleman, his lifestyle was 5 hours a week is what he works. And he runs a business, and his business is helping other entrepreneurs develop their business by selling courses and stuff like that. And he's basically got people on a recurring revenue. So he makes like $160,000 a month. Number one, not passive. How do you run that? Who does customer service? You're running a business. You may be the largely detached owner of the business, but you are running a business. You have to manage the customer service person who handles people's questions about how to log in. I forgot their password. You've got to have someone update the landing pages to sell the stuff. You've got to have, there's all kinds of stuff that goes into running a business. It is not passive income just because you have monthly recurring revenue. That monthly recurring revenue needs to be nurtured. It will eventually go away. People aren't going to stick around with any product, I don't care how good it is, for the rest of their lives in most cases. And by the way, what I take umbrage with to some extent is if you want to help improve people's lives, why not put in more of your own effort? For me, I believe in what we are doing. Doesn't mean I agree with every single person who watches this or the opinions of every single person who comes here. Doesn't mean I enjoy every single thing that goes on in the business. But I believe that helping people go where they're treated best is valuable. And so why would I limit myself to 5 hours a week? If that's a mission, I don't think, Jesus Christ was like, I'm really out there spreading this new gospel, but listen, I got things to do. I got to get my me time. No, I'm pushing it. I'm out there all the time. This is my life. This is what I live. And so, like, if you're going into something, I mean, listen, it's one thing to say, I've spent 20 years building something, and now I'm going to coast a little bit. I got my executive team. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you're going into something like, how do I work as little as possible, outsource customer service to some guy on Upwork, by the way, is that going to be the best possible service experience? I happen to think that because I'm honest about running an active services business, I spend a lot more time, and our team now spends a lot more time training people who come on board. What is the brand that we want to present to people, right? I don't want someone who doesn't understand the business. Hey, here's your password. And so because I believe in this, I don't want to be passive income. I want to invest as much of my time as possible, not only growing my income, which is why the passive income will never catch up to the active income, because the active income keeps growing, and even though how much of it you can throw off into tax-free dividend payments to the shareholder, it's just not going to be, when invested conservatively, because again, the business is the more complementary, more volatile thing. It's not going to catch up. And so, like, the reason, and this is obviously a bias of mine, but the reason why I just think the passive income business doesn't make sense is, how do you get into a business and not want to push it as far as you can? Could you look the people that you're missing if you're working 5 or 10 hours a week? Could you look the people that you're missing in the eye and be like, hey, listen, I believe in go where you're treated best, but I wasn't invested enough to get around to talking to you. You weren't, the fact that you didn't go where you're treated best, hey, tough luck, man. I wanted to work 5 hours a week. I just don't get it. And I don't know how, if I'm in a business, I'm either in it or I'm out of it. And so I don't get that. Like, how do you not want to scale up? One thing I see is when people move overseas and they use our help to dramatically reduce their tax rate, so often the business jumps up because they get a motivation kick. And they're like, okay, now I'm playing entirely or almost entirely for me. And so I happen to wonder how many folks living in a place like the United States or another high tax country are thinking they're chasing passive income, when the reality is they're just like, I don't want to trade my time for paying the tax bill anymore. Hey, I'll take the $160,000 a month. When it could be $1.6 million a month. And if you really believe in serving people, then you'd be serving a lot more people who need your help and making money. And so again, it all kind of comes into this area where it's like, rich people are bad, and like, don't work so like, don't act like an old school rich person who like really works hard, and like, but don't make too much. Like, okay, just feel cool leaving money on the table because like we don't want. It's like, no, making as much money as possible when doing it in the service of others is a good thing, and I think it's often missed in these conversations. And so, from my perspective, passive income, number one, should be conservative. If you have something that's just wildly volatile, that's not really passive. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to put my money into a high-yielding cryptocurrency investment. I really don't know how you can entirely claim that's passive. Can you just sit back for the next 20 years and say, I'm confident with all the issues where certain exchange has had problems and all that, I'm sure my check will come every month? You can't. I'm not saying don't do that as part of a portfolio. I'm not saying don't do it entirely. But if you're doing that, you probably want to be like monitoring, as I see people all over the internet in the cryptocurrency space doing, like, oh, hey, this isn't the place to put my money anymore. And so there's really no such thing as passivity, because even if you, as some famous investors say, put all your money in one basket and then watch the basket, the watching removes the passivity, right? There is work to be done. And so I think it should be more conservative. I happen to think that if you reduce your taxes by living overseas and you can keep more of your own money, you get to be a lot more conservative, and therefore this conversation shifts entirely. So, for me, I'm taking a chunk of money that I'm planning on coming in the next 6 months, and I'm allocating that right to an unsexy term deposit at anywhere between 3 and 6%. Why? I'm going to invest that money eventually, but I'm basically dollar cost averaging in. I've got, I don't want to move all that cash into investments. And so, that's pretty passive. If you are in the 14th strongest bank in the world, yeah, I think that's probably about as passive as you can get, just earning money at 3%. Is that going to keep up with inflation? No, and so long term you need to reduce the passivity. But to me, that's really some of the only kinds of passive income that you can have, where it's just truly, all right, I'm not going to worry too much about it. Here's your 3%. And by the way, if you're some of the people that we work with, we have people who have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, and they make 3% a year, and guess what? For the rest of their lives, they may not be creating as much of a legacy, but for the rest of their lives, they're ready for any opportunities that come up because that's what they want to do. They want to buy into businesses, they want to buy into other stuff. And you know what, no matter how bad unless you have hyperinflation, which certainly you could in some places, but unless you have hyperinflation everywhere in the world, yeah, they'll have $60 million in 10 years. Not saying that's the best approach, but just saying this is what I'm entitled to live in passive income. So really quickly, everything requires babysitting. Let me give you a couple of more examples. People say, oh, you want to have passive income, sell a book. I sell a book. I can tell you it goes up and down. If you're relying on that book to live, you're going to have a problem. It is passive in some regards, but again, are you going to make the book as good as possible? Are you going to run Amazon ads for the book? Are you going to update the book? Are you going to write more books? Are you going to make it a book business? I don't think most people just write a book and just leave it alone and goodbye. Someone said start a YouTube channel. But the least passive way you can make money that I could possibly imagine. And by the way, if you stop putting out content on a lot of social media platforms, you're going to start to stop getting views and stop getting action. And so how is that passive at all, right? Yeah, I guess there's some passivity from past videos people might keep watching. There's no guarantee people are going to keep watching those videos. People say make a course and sell it, like the guy that I mentioned. It just doesn't really work. There's always things that have to be done. Recurring income is not passive. Okay, MRR is not passive. And so everything really requires babysitting. I think this idea of passive income is just something that is way too sold to people as a way to not do work. And the better answer is find a way to be passionate about what you do, which is very cliche, but it happens to be true, and then use Nomad Capitalist principles to reduce your cost of living and taxes so that if you want to live on a beach in Mexico, you can do that. But rather than doing nothing and hoping that your course doesn't increase its churn rate this quarter, and you get the same amount of passive income to pay your bills to live in Mexico and have to go back home and get a job, why not build something that's sustainable, put in the effort for 5, 10, 20 years? Yeah, I know that's hard, and yeah, I know it doesn't seem sexy, but if you're doing something that you really believe in, then you're going to want to power it up because you're going to want to help more people. You're going to feel the joy of making more money. When you reduce your taxes, you're going to feel happier. You can put more in, and you can go buy a house on the sand in a place like Mexico with all the money that you're saving, and you're going to have a better quality of life. And you're going to really enjoy it because you're like, I really did something. I didn't just put money back and let it be managed. Because I can tell you this from my perspective, I think most people, if you just won the lottery and put $100 million in that term deposit and you just made $3 million a year, or you put it in some other product that made 4, 5, 6% a year, I don't really know that your life would be that fulfilling. And that's why people who win the lottery and have that problem often go back right to where they started. And so if you don't have the basis of building up the sources that allow you to create some kind of semi-passive income, because again, nothing's passive, everything has to be watched, then I just don't think it's really going to be as enjoyable. And I think that people are going to be seeking some kind of they're going to be seeking what they're missing in life. But there's really no way where you just sit back and collect money. Everything has to be watched, everything has to be managed, and I think people are really overselling this.